I'm Laurel Milton, Laurel, Milton, and I work with Josh in the area of fund development and global events. Well, after an arduous day of travel yesterday, cramming a 3-hour trip into 14 hours, I'm here on the set of the movie about Josh's early life and coming to faith. Well, we're really excited about this project. I know Josh would like to be here himself. He's in Croatia today. He and Dottie are celebrating their 40th anniversary. One of the reasons we feel this project is so important is that for years people have been coming to Josh asking him to film his testimony, asking him to share his story in a way that could be more broadly distributed. And he's just completing his 50th year in ministry, which is quite an accomplishment. And so in this 50th year, the thought was, this is the time to capture Josh's story in a significant way so that it can be used for years to come, and so that it can answer the many requests he receives from around the world to have this story in a film version. Well, over the last 50 years, Josh has spoken at live events around the United States and across the world. He's given over 25,000 talks to millions, literally, of young people, parents, adults, pastors. He has published, written or co-written, 127 titles, I believe. And then there are all sorts of videos and electronic media that go with that, DVDs, CDs, books on CD, films in the early days. And Josh basically shares his story with people. Josh came from an agnostic position. He was a skeptic. And until he was confronted with the truth about Christ in trying to disprove it, he really didn't believe in God. He didn't believe in a loving God, a loving Father. And so this is about that story and how he came to faith in Christ. There's 4 things that people say to Josh as he travels the world that they relate to about his story. The first one is alcoholism. Growing up with an alcoholic father is a message that really transcends cultures and generations. The second thing is having been sexually abused at a young age. Thirdly, being so desperate and coming from such a dysfunctional family situation that he actually contemplated suicide as a young boy. And then finally, the intellectual skepticism that resulted from those experiences. And that's really the foundation of his story and of this film. Josh really has been a trailblazer in the field of what we call relational apologetics. He talks about the truth of Christ in the context of authentic relationships. And so it's not just truth, and it's not just relationships, it's truth and relationships. And that's been his theme through many, many years now, through many books and resources, and through many talks. Well, this is a timeless story, and I think capturing this story at this time is really critical, because in so many cultures, in our own culture here in the United States, and in cultures all over the world, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia, we hear the same themes that are coming through. People don't have a foundation in apologetics. They don't know what it is they believe or why it's true or how to live it out in their relationships. And that's exactly what Josh's ministry, and in fact his entire life, has been committed to. So it's a great and powerful opportunity to address those issues around the world. Well, Josh McDowell Ministry is part of Campus Crusade for Christ. We're a division of Campus Crusade for Christ International. And of course, our primary customer or constituency are Campus Crusade for Christ missionaries all over the world. And they have a wide representation. They use Josh's books in their ministries. They use Josh's books to win people to Christ, to build them in their faith and encourage them through discipleship training, and then to send them out to make more disciples. And we feel this film will build on all the books that have gone before. Josh has more than 50 million books in circulation. And this film will build on those messages, and it will open the door to more messages. You know, there are many places where traditional missionaries can't go to share their faith. And so books are like little missionaries that go in the door instead of a person. And you hear so many stories across the world, in the Middle East, in Europe, in the former Soviet Union, we just hear so many stories about how books have changed lives. And video, DVDs, video that's downloadable on websites has the opportunity to go even more places than books can go. So we think there's quite a wide application. There's an application also beyond just missionaries around the world. There's applications in this country, in every youth group, in every church. This story will present a starting point for people to talk about some of the rough issues in their lives. Well, because so many parts of the world, people who want to share their faith in Christ are at risk at their very lives. There are some things that we can't share with you, but what we can share is we think this story can go anywhere a great story can go. And I think the sky's the limit. I think it can be used in small group settings, it can be used individually, it could be downloadable on websites throughout the world. Josh's vision right now, and we're just at the very beginning of the project, his vision is to put this immediately into 35 languages. And he wants to see 5,000 to 10,000 copies in each language. And so that's the beginning point for use. His books are, some of them, More Than a Carpenter, for example, is in 85 languages right now. And so there's an opportunity to use this as kind of a rocket to take those messages forward into other cultures. Well, I had the privilege of meeting Josh 14 years ago when I worked on a training program for what was then called Operation Carelift. It was Mission to Russia, where Josh was taking volunteers over to do humanitarian aid and bring hope when the doors of Russia first opened and the Soviet Union crumbled. So that was my first exposure to Josh. And then through the years, I continued coming back and doing more projects with him until the ministry was filling up most of my time. And it's a real privilege to serve with a number of other people. We have 40 to 50 people around the world who work together to share Josh's story and his resources and help him in what God has called him to do. And it's a privilege to do that. Well, there's a lot of energy and excitement on the set, and it's an interesting day to come. You know, I'm very familiar with Josh's story. I've probably heard his testimony hundreds of times over the last few years. And I hear something new every time he tells it. But I'll tell you today, being on set, seeing his story come alive has been very touching and very poignant, because the scenes they're filming today are, of course, some of the scenes of his father and mother's relationship. And being right there in the barn with the cows and watching the woman who's playing his mother come in and watching the man who's playing his alcoholic father stumble around in the barn has really brought that story alive. You know, you hear it and it touches you. You see it and it touches you even more. So one of the exciting things about this project, Doug, is the fact that the film is going to be ready to be launched on Josh's 50th anniversary celebration in Dallas on October 7th through 9th. We're so excited to be seeing the film for the very first time during that occasion, where a lot of the people, a lot of the friends who have supported Josh through the years, a lot of our ministry partners from around the world, many of the leadership of Campus Crusade for Christ will be there. Many of our staff through the years are all going to be there to celebrate with Josh and his family, his kids and his grandkids and Dottie. And it'll be the first screening of the docudrama on his life. And so we're really excited. It's a great opportunity to launch the next 50 years of ministry. Well, isn't it interesting that you filmed Josh and Dottie on the set almost a year before you'll be screening the film for the first time? October 2010, I think, was when you did the fall scenes. And Josh was so excited. Both Josh and Dottie were so touched. And in fact, it was a real emotional experience for them to be here in Michigan, to experience the beautiful fall weather and the realistic scenes, and really to have so many of those memories come back for Josh. I think it was powerful for him. I think it was life-changing for him in a way to reflect back. It made his story come alive again. I think if Josh were here right now today, he'd be enjoying the outdoors just like we are, the sound of the birds and the beautiful weather and spring kind of popping out everywhere at us. And when Josh tells his story, you know, Michigan is certainly the backdrop. One of the things he'll tell you, though, it's not about him. It's about God's faithfulness. And I think that's one of the beautiful things to see is that God can take a story like Josh's, of so many challenges, of abuse, of dysfunction, of running into hardship after hardship after hardship, roadblock after roadblock. And he can turn it into something beautiful and something that other people can relate to. And I think that's where Josh always ends. He's really talking about how faithful God has been to, through his story, make it about God's faithfulness. You know, I've had the privilege to travel with Josh and Dottie a little bit and hear Josh speak so many places, and people continually come up to him and say, "Josh, that's my story. That happened to me." And I think it's the same thing with this movie. I think people are going to say, "That's my story." And if that can be redeemed, then maybe there's hope for me. Well, I think that Josh's story has kind of come out in stages through the years. I know about a year ago, I heard him share with some of our ministry supporters a story that I hadn't heard before, and it was that while he was a student, a college student, after he had come to faith in Christ, I believe he was at Wheaton College at the time, he had a terrible stutter. And he told the story of being at some spiritual emphasis week where a speaker was talking about giving God your talents and your gifts and letting him work through you. And he really struggled because he stuttered. He said, "How can God work through me?" And yet look at where he is today and how he has become a speaker that is not only heard around the world, but whose story has gone out, and I've never heard him stutter. So, I mean, it's just an amazing thing for his family, I think, too, to hear these parts of his story and how God has worked in his life, and I think they're inspired. I know they're all behind it, and if you've had a chance to meet Dottie, I know you know Dottie, she's just delightful, and his children are wonderful. You know, so many times we see people who have a message, have been entrusted with a message, but maybe their personal lives don't reflect that message. With Josh, really what you see is what you get. He's a great father. He puts an emphasis on relationships. He's that way with his staff. He cares about the people who serve with him. He's just truly authentic in relating to other people, and that's such a blessing. It's inspiring. I want to say thank you to all of you, to every person who's involved in this project, for your time, for your energy, for your gifts, for sharing those things and being part of this. I think you are going to be part of changing the world.
That's pretty